In this episode of the Comportment Podcast, we reconnect after a full few weeks and dive deep into the relationship between internal dialogue, risk-taking, and authentic cooperation. We explore the difference between preparing for interactions versus simply showing up, the power of being candid, and how internal narratives shape and often limit our actions. We reflect on values-based work, personal evolution, and the haunting weight of constant self-assessment. Join us as we ask the big questions. What happens when we stop pretending? What do we gain from speaking aloud, even if no one's listening? And who are we, really? There. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad. Good to see you.
You too. Oh, 2 weeks flew by so fast in my world. How's
Yeah.
it been in yours?
Been so overscheduled that, this fun priority didn't even make it to my list. So I was surprised. And yes, it does seem like just yesterday we were talking. Well, not really. I mean, so much has happened, but
Yeah,
not downtime's not one of them.
right. Yeah, exactly. That's how I've been too. Uh, nice weather we've had if we can handle the heat though.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Definitely
fine.
been.
Working in my
Yeah.
basement, so I don't have to. Yeah. And then I do actually when I was in Arizona, I worked in construction for 10 years. And
Oh
so,
wow.
I mean, so I just I know that if I get my hair wet and I put on a wet do-rag, I can manage for an hour and be real comfortable in the heat. So I did a lot of chores this last weekend in the nice hot weather, but doing fine.
Excellent. Yeah. We did you do anything to celebrate on the 4th?
My kid came home from camp on Friday, real tired, and we were expecting some house guests that didn't turn out. So just kind of a normal, uh, difficult day.
See.
Yeah. Um,
Uh,
Unique situation now, though. One kid's at camp, one kid's at my mom's. My wife's out camping for a little personal vacation,
oh
and
wow.
it's just me and the dog.
Some downtime, or maybe not downtime, some time to attend to the things you can only do alone.
You just clean
Maybe.
up and work,
Yeah. Yeah.
be on my own schedule.
Oh, that doesn't sound too bad.
Not at all.
That's good. Well, what's been on your mind?
Well, what's been on my mind mostly has just been my work, trying to just take big risks with proposals I make and getting some accepted recently, which has been rewarding and risky at the same time. But none of that would happen had the offer not been made. And I just
Right?
mean like internal offers to my job, like offering to help people work out certain problems they are experiencing. It's in my role pretty easy to not make offers and stand on the sidelines. And that'll get you nowhere. So when the offers get accepted, it's like, wow, you're moving fast. Okay, let's do it.
Well, sounds exciting at least.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's risky. You get out on a limb. You don't know what's going to happen. You try and kind of just see what reflect on it all later. You
It's
also
been
go ahead.
no, no, you first.
I was going to say also through that you really test people. You by taking risks and making proposals, people show you what they know and what they don't, and it's
Hmm.
nice because that unhides a lot of things that maybe people don't lead with.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I have been thinking a lot about the ways that we don't. There's so much. Yeah, I do it a lot. I'm sure you've done it a bunch, and I know a lot of people around me do it a lot, maybe all the time. But you kind of get into discussions with imaginary versions of people in your mind when you could be having discussions with the actual person in reality. And but it's safe in your mind, right? There's uh there's no potential for rejection in your mind. You can
Right.
imagine rejection, but it's not real, right? and but there's also no potential for actual cooperation in your mind alone either.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
we I think it's kind of one of the great challenges of our sort of competition based and merit based myth of our culture, in which the we're haunted constantly by the sense of like, will I be approved of or accepted or, deemed good enough for whatever? When in fact, in the I feel like the thing that makes effective cooperation most probable, the single factor that increases its probability the most, is the mere co-presence of people. Uh, like just actually having a person within reach or within earshot, someone who's close enough to you that you can direct their attention somewhere. And where does it go? I don't know, but it maybe unfolds pretty naturally from
Mm.
that point. But our our
Yeah.
lives are made up of so many interactions with people who aren't quite present, or they're going to be present just this day for this time, and I need to you know run through my little script a billion times so that I know how to be acceptable and how to get the attention I want in that moment. And I find myself wondering a lot of the time, like, am I really just wasting this time? What would happen if I just showed up and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?"
Yeah.
Just be candid, be a person, and not necessarily because I'm either gonna be able to direct your attention to something that I'm attending to, and we're gonna do something, make something happen, or not.
Hmm.
And my ability to really predict what's going to cause that to work, arguably, well, I wonder if it blunts my own intuitions about what I want and what I would naturally attend to, uh, and kind of turns me into a fake version of myself, or maybe even less fake and more like dead, or like static, uh, not dynamic, like I
Right.
might be if I just you know let it happen. Uh,
Yeah.
but I'm still going to spend a lot of my time this week thinking about how to prepare for for
Yeah.
various.
Yeah. Uh, you said candid. I think I really like that word to describe good relations. It was in Peter Yohasi's book about, I forget what exactly, relationships. He wrote a book about meaningful relationships, and candid was like, I think, oh, it was like level 3 of 4 levels of a relationship. The last one being intimate. As far as depth of relationship goes, candid is just before that, and it's really where we should be operating all the time, as much as possible, and even going into a going into relationships with that as your attitude. It's right on, and it's disarming, and it makes working with people easy. Prior to being candid, I think he said discovery is kind of the second most, the second. I mean, just start from the beginning where you're not having a good relationship. I think he described it as pretense,
Mm.
like pointing out flaws, like not listening, waiting to speak, that kind of thing. And then it was discovery, and then being candid, and then being intimate.
I don't know what the context was this week, but somehow at some point the image of showing one's belly um, came to mind, and the sort of just like the the we talk about vulnerability a lot, or there's talk of vulnerability a lot, but just that just really, to me, candid kind of fits the feeling more, where it's just like, hey, I have these soft spots. I am limited here. I
Yeah.
have weaknesses here. And, but all of those places, all of those things represent opportunity for cooperation for people who can balance those things out, and we can get some stuff done together. But let's not pretend for a moment that any of these things are what I bring to the table. No, these are these are places where I need help. And it's it it's it's like when we decide to not be candid, it's like we've just created these futures that are increasingly like false or fictive or based on a pretense, like you say, pretentious. And I yeah, yet at the same time we have so many tools. Like I guess I was thinking like even about the topics we've been talking about on some level, we use these as tools for private language use. I can use language to coordinate, but I can use language to observe myself. And what I think an important question that there's like a tipping point within the observe myself language usage in which I'm observing myself for the purpose of getting clarity on why I'm trying to cooperate, or I'm observing myself for the purpose of crafting myself as like an acceptable cooperator, like as trying to fit the image of an acceptable cooperator. And, you know, whatever we are, that's not what we are. We are just people with intentions and desires and feelings. And, whether we might be assessed by someone as uh attractive cooperator isn't, it's over here,
And you
and
can control that really, even if you go in and say all the right things at all the right times with all the right tonal inflections, their opinion can be whatever their opinion is.
it's almost worse, right? Because then I don't know. On some level, I relish a good fuck up in the beginning of a relationship. It's just a chance to see,
Yeah.
how we roll with the punches, and it's kind
Yeah, I
of
think I use that strategy very unconsciously in a lot of my relationships with significant others in like my late teens into through my 20s. I
yeah.
would like test them to see if they'd stick around, and it was a flawed strategy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where these things they all circle back on themselves, right? Because it's like if we're naturally just being ourselves and we fuck up, well, that's a test of the relationship in a way, but thinking of it analytically as a test in the relationship turns it into this artificial moment of like, are you really good enough for me? Like you have to put up with the shittiest side of me or else,
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable around you and I'm gonna go run and hide and find someone else to pretend to have a relationship with. Um, at the same time, having a real relationship may involve dealing with the shittiest moments of a person. And it's it's not like it's not artificial because it's not factual. It's artificial because of the the mode of maybe well maybe I'm not saying this, but maybe I'll float out there. Maybe it's artificial because of the mode of language use that we're in when we construct it. Uh,
Well, lack of responsibility based speaking.
well, elaborate on that more. What do you mean?
Well, I just mean to say, like, if when I was trialing these ladies through, being in a relationship with me, uh, I could have been more self aware, admittedly. At the time, maybe I wasn't aware of it because I was, in it. But yeah, I don't think I was taking this very seriously. I was not being very responsible
Hmm.
with me or with them or with my integrity or with my honor or their honor, or whatever the case may have been at the time.
Well, and to maybe let you off the hook a little bit though, because you didn't understand that you were using them as a tool for self-validation rather than like just being with them, right? I mean, you come to understand that and you grow and and we use these analytic techniques and self-observation techniques to come to that point, but then it's like that decision point, right? Like who am I? Who do I want to create myself as? And like the person I feel like it's difficult to to say, but there might be something to constructing yourself as who you really are. And, we threaten to get kind of circular here because we are making decisions. That is who we are. It's kind of, but are you pulling yourself further into a pretense that you then have to like double down and force yourself to live up to the standards implied by? Or are you acknowledging that the aspects of your own identity and I guess I always want to chalk it up in this case to like cultural influence. I don't think that humans kind of out in our quote unquote imaginary state of nature are seeking validation much more than through the simple like continued co-presence that is kind of intrinsic to how we survived as earlier in our evolutionary history. It's you're with a group or you're left for dead. And there doesn't need to be, I mean, obviously there's rites of passage and rituals and cultures about, how you take on more responsibility and become deeper in as an adult into a group. But finally, it's like at whatever stage you're at, are we doing this or not? It's a pretty simple yes or no. Like we will stop and attend to you or we will leave you for dead. And uh, those cues that make it clear that we're not being left for dead, pretty easy to satisfy. I suspect that most humans didn't struggle with a lot of feelings of insecurity. um, they were caught up in not being left for dead and not leaving for dead, and only in really extreme circumstances left for dead or leaving for dead, and not tormenting or the constant psychological torment of self-evaluation and all of these different micro rungs of society. And it's like, how many different ways do I identify, and am I fucking up all of them? Are there any that I'm doing well? And it's like, well,
This
my
actually
heart kept beating.
this reminds me of our conversation last week around being stuck in assessments.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're in that trap that you just described, that's the feeling. Like that's the being is stuck in all these opinions about everything and how much they matter. And boy, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking to myself, living a values-based life is preferable to even trying to comprehend that network around me. And I don't know if that's a great strategy. It just seems to work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, at work, I'm trying to like help the junior people rise up as kind of one of my main focus approaches. And no matter what I'm doing on my projects, that's going to be part of it. And like not being able to do that would be like the one thing that if I was told I can't do that, I'm gonna have a problem with. I'm gonna and eventually quit the job if I can't do employee empowerment as like a main focus area for my job. I mean, like that's why I'm working. So that's more of a values based thing rather than trying to understand all of the different influences everyone has on each other and all the right things to say in order to do what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's exhausting to try to comprehend that much, and then super stressful.
Yeah, but we could trick ourselves pretty easily too, I think, into like, you know, uh, assessments can be disguised as every other kind of speech act, I guess, is on because they're all there's always this circling back, there's always this reflective aspect of language, so we can kind of like disguise an assessment as any other kind of speech act, and then like pretend to ourselves that we're actually doing something. And in fact, we are not doing anything other than just talking to ourselves ad infinitum. And it's I'm wondering if the sort of the way to when we've gotten so twisted up in our use of these like analytic categories, like the various types of speech acts, that we've seen where the normative line goes through it. It's like, okay, I'm not supposed to be caught up in assessments. So now I'm gonna do everything the way a person who's not caught up in assessments does. And I'm going to make a ton of assessments about how that works, and then assess myself whether I'm, fitting to it. It's just, how do you break out? How do you like just stop? And I wonder if something about just the mere involvement of another person is essential. The simple, like, and not like another person, like a therapist, not to put down therapy, but is there something I'm trying to do? Will you do it with me? Is there something that we are trying to do? In the world in which there's something that we are trying to do, the opportunities for tipping into action are so much greater than if my language game is private. And on some level, no language game is private because it's all culturally constructed and provided to us by our social capacities. But then we can just turn it completely on ourselves, and now we are in this, and potentially in this endless monologue with ourselves. Monologue pretending to be a dialogue, and getting nothing done. And maybe the you know as we as modern individuals are like more and more isolated, we turn to like philosophy more because we don't actually have just people prodding us to action through directing our shared attention, seeing obvious problems, obvious steps we can take to address them, and just go.
We're
Um,
too busy watching television
yeah.
or,
Yeah. Well,
whatever they call it, doom scrolling.
well, you mean you're only successful to the extent that you can't relate to anybody, you know?
Yes, sir. Well said. I was just thinking to myself, like, negative self-talk is like your limiting factor. It's like the degree to how severe your negative self-talk is right where you're limited. And that's going to keep you from growing. It's going to keep you from expanding. It's going to keep you from developing others.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I'm curious, do you, so, I mean, we've been talking about talking to ourselves in a sort of metaphorical way, because I think
yeah,
that what I've been describing does not involve like using my mouth to say words necessarily. It might, but often it's
yeah.
just this thing going on up here, right? But are
Hmm.
there times when you actually use your mouth and say words out loud that are only intended to be heard by you? Do you do
Only if
that
I
ever?
only if I want to lie.
Only if you want to lie?
But bing.
What do you mean?
Well, it's funny you ask because in preparation, that's exactly where my mind went. It was starting to observe my own internal narrative and when I do and when I don't use language.
Hmm.
And so, for example, when I got home tonight, there was 18 different tiny micro tidy up chores to do. One of which was make coffee. You know, take the grounds out, wash the filter, grind the beans, do the 5 steps involved in that plus cleanup. And I didn't want to do that. I also didn't want to, hang up the 3 shirts on my bed and fold the pants. Um, and I can elaborate, but you get the point.
Hmm.
How this actually showed up to me internally was more of like, I think it was more of a body sensation than anything. It was a sensation of tiredness, of like, my posture's poor, and to do these things prevents me from higher quality entertainment, resting and relaxing, all that stuff. It just delays all that stuff. But I also know that I'm going to appreciate waking up in the morning with the counters cleared and all that. So it came out as kind of like I guess it was an assessment, but it was like a moan and a grunt from a narrative perspective. Like there wasn't a lot of verbalness going on at the time. It was more like it was just like a sigh of struggle.
Hmm.
Now, when words do become present for me in my narratives, I like to write poetry. I like to I like to verbally like slam, what is it called? Slam poetry, where you just kind of like make up a song or whatever.
Hmm. Okay.
Rap, I wouldn't call it rap. I mean, that's kind of like, I've got friends who rap, and what I do is like they would not call that rap. But and that's super fun and very creative, and it's a way for me to like really explore a lot of things, being curious. Where my narrative is less helpful from um, just my observations of my historic patterns, and I think a lot of people would identify with this, is in like making declarations of change.
Hmm.
You know, if I take a blank piece of paper here and I write a contract saying I will do this and I will not do this, and I sign it. I mean, that's just, grist for the mill and will be recycled and thrown away momentarily.
Hmm.
And so, like, a lot of the narratives I use are, I think, more um, like momentary assessment driven, like kind of leading to action and inaction, but like promises and requests, or like these big declarations of change. I have a really hard time with using internal narrative for those purposes,
Hmm.
and maybe that's just like a feature of where I'm at on my learning curve with language in my life. I don't know, a result of my upbringing and how language has been used, other cultural influences on my circumstance that prevents change or disallows change or like inhibits change. So like, you know, I don't, it's funny. I mean, it's like I'm incongruent at the same time. I want to say on one hand, I don't walk into a room and say, "Oh, I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this and these 18 things. Then I'm going to, go relax." I say I don't do that. Yet, what I do find myself doing is writing to-do lists, and then rewriting to-do lists, and then like it goes on, like reflecting on past to-do lists. And I've got, 2 carton boxes full of this kind of crap. And all of this is internal narrative expressed into writing. And it's super powerful and super important. It allows me to comprehend things way more than I would be able to otherwise keep track of without the assistance of language and, the consistency of writing it down. So more on this, back to you. Internal language versus external language. Where is writing and journaling at in this?
Oh, as a person who publishes nothing, I guess I feel like that must render it as internal language. And yeah, I remember, I sit down and start writing a lot of things, and I don't consider you know, my body decides it wants to write, I let it write, and then at some point it doesn't want to anymore, and I say, okay. And but what am I writing?
Thanks.
I remember I started a piece, gosh, probably 10 years ago now, entitled Why We Write, where I was trying to tackle this question. It's just like, I am motivated to sit here, hands on keyboard, eyes on screen for some reason, and it's just like, what is and I think honestly, at that time, what I was trying to get at is still what we're trying to get at in this discussion, this sense of like, is the assessments are packaged so closely around everything, but on the one hand, like, I don't want to find myself feeling like, I think in particular, I don't want to share my writing that clearly I only did for self-reflective purposes. Um, I don't want like to to seek external validation over an expression that really was like asserting an internal standard, if that makes sense. Like what do I think? What do I believe? These sort of
Yeah.
uh, potential declarations about oneself. And
Right.
I I should be able to resolve this on my own. I should not need to get the approval of other people on these topics.
Yep.
At the same time, I'm not really interested in just being a work of art, a work of self art in a closet, tucked away or hermetically sealed inside of some archival quality preservation bag in some vault somewhere. I
You
want
just, you'll
to,
just you'll just die unknown.
yeah, I want to direct attention, and I want to have my attention directed, and I want to cooperate.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
but we find ourselves in such hyper constructed and artificial environments and
Oh
social
yeah.
realities
Uh-huh.
that it's just kind of like I have remained, back to the question, if I were to answer, in my own experience, when do I find myself actually saying out loud words when I'm the only person in the room? Uh, Usually it's like when I'm trying to force my attention out of a certain pattern that I've decided is worth experimenting with a different pattern, but I'm habituated into a certain pattern and like need to like I took ski instruction and there's certain very counterintuitive, especially when you're in your 30s learning how to ski. It's not a super intuitive uh, dynamic, and I had to constantly overpower certain tendencies or just train myself against certain tendencies. And I got the voice of my coach literally behind my head as I'm going down, and then once I'm off on my own, now the voice of my coach is in my head, and it's really just my own voice now, but I'm just trying to use it to direct my attention towards these possible behaviors and movements and
Yeah.
feelings that are not normal for me, and to learn to be sensitive to them and to like give them a try, just
Mm-hmm.
to kind of be open to this new experience. Um, and
Speaking to the power of
sometimes,
praise.
hmm, often there are like encouraging statements in the midst of that. It's like not only here's what to do, but you can do it.
Yeah.
And you want to do it. Like you're not forcing yourself into this awkward experience because it's like, for any reason other than because you thought it would be worthwhile to do. So, it feels weird. Your body's struggling, but you're gonna go ahead and go through these motions anyway. And uh, you know, the other time is when like I'll just sing. I'll just start singing. And I,
Hmm.
that has to count as use of words, and but I'm not using it cooperatively to direct anyone else's attention, And what is it about? I don't know. I would love to think about it more, I suppose. But it happens. And but adjacent to those coaching moments are potential, there's a lot of opportunity there for like negative self-talk. Uh, it's not something that I really experience a lot. I admit, I've got
Negative
a,
self-talk.
yeah, I feel like it was one of the benefits of the particular kind of experience I had growing up where, I was told that I had this, very loving, very approving, super powerful friend always there with me. And, you know, kind of could do no wrong on some level. And if I did, I was just gonna have to learn from it and, err in the Christian sense, confess your sins, but in the sort of like dialectical sense, just acknowledge what went wrong and what you can learn from it. And, in the next iteration will be refined, and
Very compelling argument to being Christian.
well, I don't know if it always spins out this way. I think that it just, I think that in my particular experience, because you hear a lot of people talking about feelings of guilt and, but maybe just because this particular framework is impressed on me so young, like there was always this attitude, like I never quite understood what the adults were on about, like, oh, the good news, we're forgiven. It's like I didn't do anything wrong. I mean, maybe I did, but I'm not sitting here feeling bad for myself and feeling like I'm a horrible person that needs to be like, that's
Mm.
not the thing. The thing is that like, you know, shit's scary and I got to deal with it anyway. And so, I don't want to, I know that I'm not going to gain anything by ignoring the scary things. And so I just need to summon the determination to confront the scary things. And in this case, it was always kind of a sense that like, I mean, it's funny, these thoughts are so distant in my past and I don't really think about them, but I think it's, like I never think now that it's like, God's on your side and, the angels will carry you through or anything like this. I don't think those things, but I do feel the feelings that thinking those things made me feel. And then I have come up with my own like internal ways of just prodding, that I guess actually, honestly, the real way it's kind of decayed for me into you're only a human organism doing what a human organism does. And nothing you ever do will be something other than what a human organism does. Like, my successes and my failures are all going to be severely limited to the spectrum of possibility of what humans do. And what those limitations are not my doing. I find it impossible to feel bad about the fundamental limitations that I experience as a human. Now, I can feel bad about the choices I make, but I can also forgive myself seeing that, well, as a human under those circumstances, that choice was likely. Um, but we regret it or we have
Mm.
deemed it a mistake and we want to learn something from it. How do we unpack that? And I don't know how I got onto this whole thing about Christianity, but I'm quite sure that not everyone else, like, I feel like not everyone who is raised Christian gets that particular,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
very,
uh, on one hand, that lesson is like the main reason and point. I mean, being moral and having loving kindness. I mean, that's throughout the lessons and teachings. So it's like also like it's also like should be like the biggest takeaway.
mhm. Well, and
Having
that's,
peace, living a loving life.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I'm
that,
not
and
one. Go ahead.
no, no, sorry, you go
You
ahead.
first. I'm not one to really do much depth comment on Christianity. My dad was an atheist, and I've never heard even gone.
Well, I guess it just goes back to what you were saying about values based, and this sort of like one thing that was clear to me, I'm forced to go to all these Sunday school things, and they're not, for the most part, anything other than what you just described. They're stories of being kind and like not, and just not giving into fear or greed or selfishness or whatever.
Sure.
And there was constant in my community. The one thing that was a constant thread was the shared value that being that way was a good thing. That this was the sort of the ideal that we were all aspiring to. And as really what we were all doing was directing our attention in a shared way towards this ideal and not using it as a standard of judgment against each other, hopefully, but using it as just a point of reference for what we're striving for.
Mm.
And oh, we're out of
Well,
time, aren't we?
we're close, yeah. But I also want to, ask you a rhetorical question and lead into what we might talk about next time.
Hmm.
So the question is, did that stuff help you, you know, be who you are? Maybe at that time, or be who you wanted to be, or be who you thought you should be. And that's really the question I'd like to dive into next week with you is, you know, who are you?
Hmm.
Uh, there's lots of ways that, paradigms to understand that question. What's
Hmm.
useful? Which ones are useful and practical and you employ on a daily basis?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a scary question. I mean, I love it. I'm excited to get into that. But I've been reflecting a bit on this theme recently and realizing that there was a lot of stuff I don't acknowledge that is very real and true about, who I am, but it's not what I talk about a lot of the time. And
Mm,
I think for a lot of the reasons that our point of departure today was about, because there was this complicated web of internal self-assessments that decided that
right.
presenting myself that way would make me unacceptable.
Right.
Uh, you know.